Hello and welcome everybody to day 2 of the Qatar Urban Forum. My name's Tim McCower and I've been working with Msheireb for 6 years, mainly focusing on bringing the old centre of Doha back to life with the project you've seen downstairs. And the fact that this forum is happening, and I don't know how many of you were here yesterday, but it was great, and it's a great beginning of a journey for us. Of reflecting the fact that we're certainly looking at the main task in hand, but we're very much looking beyond in terms of the wider region, the wider world, and beyond in terms of the wider topic of how to make cities as good as they can be, how to make them better, how to make them sustainable in the long term, to be sustained. And today the topic is culture, heritage and identity, and that could be seen as a different topic from what we were talking about yesterday, which was more focused on definitions of the word green, definitions of the word sustainable. Obviously topics relating to climate and energy were very much part of that, but urbanism and rootedness in cities is something we talk about a lot, and it's something we certainly believe lies at the heart of creating sustainable cities. And our Msheireb's attitude to identity, Qatari identity in particular, has been one of our guiding themes. So it's a great pleasure to be able to introduce Angela Brady, who's the president of the RIBA in London. And she is going to talk about the left and the right-hand side of the brain, and how they should be joined together, what they represent in terms of how we work in our lives and relate to the world and each other. Integration is what she said was her key word. So I'm looking forward to asking her to speak to us in a couple of seconds. Angela has been 25 years in practice in London. Her firm, Brady, is known as the firm with the social conscience. They've done a lot of housing, a lot of work with heritage. And it's a great pleasure that you've come all the way from China to be here. Thanks a lot. And over to you, Angela.
Thanks very much, Tim. I come all the way from China via London, where I live, of course. And it's amazing, actually, that when you're the president of the RIBA, it's a great brand, and it's a great world brand, and you do get to meet so many interesting people. So I was delighted when, only a few days ago, when I was in China, Sabah asked me would I give the keynote. So I said, of course, I'd be happy to. And we've scrambled together some things here, which I think Sabah said, let's get something that really challenges the way we think now and the way we need to think in the future. And there's a zeitgeist out there of thought that is all about the right and left hand sides of the brain and how they work. Because on one side we have the scientific side, the logic, the mathematics side. And then on the other hand, on your left side, you have the artistic side, you have the humanities, you have all of the touchy-feely side as opposed to the hard-nosed science side. And I think that when we're designing for the future, no matter where our cities are, no matter what part of the world they are in, we need to really join up both sides of thinking. We need to join both sides of the brain. And I think that we need, in this very fast and changing world, we need to think of how is the 21st and 22nd century going to be for us? What do we have to do now? How are we going to think and make new ways of these happening? So what I've done is I've put together some notes and some slides, and I've tried to start off with a personal take on culture, because as you can tell by my accent, I'm very clearly Irish. Although I've lived in London for 25 years. Irish is a very strong identity, and at 11% of the makeup of London, we're quite a strong presence there. Then I'm going to move in and talk about heritage, because I sat on the CABE English Heritage Urban Panel for 8 years. And as we travelled all around the UK, we looked at cities that wanted to perhaps add an enclosed shopping centre into the heart of their town, which would have been what we call the anchor points today. And we think, how can we advise them not to copy or make the mistakes that others have done when all they want to do is do what the town next door have done, because they've got that big shopping centre and that's making them economically successful. When in fact, the very heart of these towns and cities that gives them their selling point, their unique selling point, whether it be a small craft centre or an old mill or whatever it is. I think the importance is that we really cling on and value our heritage. And I think that's what English Heritage do so well. And we had a marvellous urban panel. And with CABE, we were able to advise a lot of people in positions where they didn't want to or couldn't take that planning decision, to say there is an alternative way, there is a better way of doing things. And then I'm taking 3 examples which I believe are from London. Well, one is from Dublin, actually, Temple Bar, 21 years ago. And the other 2 are current regeneration developments at King's Cross and our new and exciting redevelopment of the east of London, which takes in the Olympics and the legacy that that will bring. And then a quick flick around the world at what different people are doing, and then we'll ask the serious questions. Where are we going? Should we be copying the past or looking new ways for the future? Okay, let's give this a go. Okay, so I'm Irish. We've got a huge history and a huge culture, and we value this. We think it is so important. Whether it be the hard times, when we celebrate today the harsh times of the famine, or whether it be the religious aspects of St. Patrick, who brought Catholicism to Ireland, or whether it be just every single place around Ireland that we value, whether it be small towns or new towns or the bigger cities or historic monuments. There are things that make Ireland and Irishness of great value to somebody like me. So, as students, we were always brought up to Newgrange to see the summer or the winter solstice. And it's great to actually have these fantastic monuments that have been restored by our own government and are real attractions now for people, as well as for anybody who's interested in archaeology and history. We have the infamous leprechauns and all of the jokes of the little divil of a man who's well celebrated around the world. Sometimes it seems quite kitsch, but it's also part of our folklore. We have dance, we have literature and art and poetry. And if you look at the amount of artists or poets that come out of Ireland well, certainly from the last 200 or 300 years, it's more than any other nation. And I think it's because of the lifestyle and because of the way that people, sometimes when people are oppressed, their best words might come out, whether it be in poetry or whether it be in music. We have our Irish language, which all of us had to learn at school, and I can still speak a little bit of it. And then everything else that every other country does as well, which is our flags, colours, and our borders. So, with the Irish diaspora of millions of people now working and living around the world, what ties us all together? What brings us our culture, our identity, and our heritage? Well, it's our history, it's our food, it's the drink, but not just the drink for drink's sake. It's the pub culture that's very much the living room in Ireland, where people are very sociable, and it's a bit like the living room or where they meet their friends. Religion or a religion, politics, always very strong, sport, always very strong, and the family ties that always bring us back. These are the very important things that tie Irish people together, and I know that it's very similar for a lot of people around the world. So have we, as Irish people, have we got a sense of architecture that we can distinctly say is Irish? And I'd say that we can. I'd say that we do. And I think that because Georgian Ireland was built under the time of English rule, and in those times, a lot of people just wanted, in the 70s and 80s, when Dublin got quite neglected, people wanted to scrape away everything that reminded them of England, or of the English, or of oppression. So there was an awful lot of buildings along the quays that lay derelict and that went into disrepair. And it's really only in the 90s, I think, when people wanted regeneration, that they looked to the Irish architects. And there was a young group that were called Group 91. And Group 91 was a very forward group of 10 architects in 1991. And if I look at the, actually some of the work here that I'm showing, have you got the, yeah. This is Grafton Architects, who's one of those architects from Group 91. And they won the World Architecture Prize last year for one of their projects in Milan, which is the university campus. Temple Bar, it's quite hard to actually see this particular slide, but Temple Bar was an area in Dublin that had been run down over the years by the government because they wanted to have a new bus centre right in the heart of what we would call today one of the prime locations, right on the River Liffey. And one of the important things about Temple Bar is that this group of architects had the foresight to encourage a competition for regeneration and bringing culture and living right back into the heart of the city, because urban sprawl had happened and people had started moving out of the city and the city was decaying and dying. So with this competition, it was a very successful competition, because what they had done is they had taken all of the derelict sites that were all car parks. You can see the top left is one of the car parks. And you can see in the plan there that they had created new streets and squares. They had put in 10 new cultural centres that were all going to be funded by the Irish government. And they'd brought in new housing so that it was going to be a livable, workable, working city. And I think that for many years, the Temple Bar example was exemplary because it had brought the living back into the heart of the city. And today, I mean, it's still popular with all of its stag parties and that, but it's still a very nice place to go and visit. So any of you that haven't been to Dublin, I would recommend going to Temple Bar and seeing how the new contemporary has not gone up in any pastiche manner, but the new contemporary is the new contemporary Irish architecture that is developed from a group of forward-thinking architects. That's one of the early slides of Temple Bar Square. It was creating new streets, new squares in a livable, walkable city. Now, I mentioned that I worked with English Heritage, and I think that for those people who don't know what English Heritage do, and I think that's about maybe quite a lot of the room, I thought it would be quite good to go over some of the principles of how English Heritage value our heritage, and how English Heritage, although a lot of people disagree for their own means, why English Heritage shouldn't have a say in listing buildings, whether it be grade 1, grade 2 or of special merit, that I think that they've got a great place in society. And I think that if you look at some of these things that they're doing, they make sure that England's historic environment is properly cared for. They're responsible for over 400 historic properties in England. That's quite a lot to have that response with very little funding these days. And then they encourage central, regional and local government to take proper account of the historic environment. And I think that that's what we all need to do, no matter where we are in the world. We need to value our history, our culture, our heritage, and not scrape it away. So established in '83, sponsored by the Culture, Media and Sport Department. They're forward-looking, and I think that the important thing is that making the past part of our future, and there's a great expression, you've got to look back in order to go forward. And I think that that is so important for everybody. So, heritage and regeneration. We went around England to many small towns. And it's funny, the different people have different ideas about, well, should you have a supermarket in the centre of a town, or should you have out-of-town shopping? Or what's important? Is it consumerism, or is it culture? Or is it supporting the small business? These are all things that we all think about wherever we go and wherever we're asked to comment on such things. Very active in Cornwall and in Sicily. And the Objective 1 programme was a very big success for English Heritage. So integrated partnership working has been a key. And integration is one of the main things that I'm saying. It's integration. It's integration of new and old, and of people, and of history, and of heritage. And we've got to understand place. I think that place is so important. Place is what anchors us. if you don't have place or a sense of place, well, where do you come from? And I think it's very hard when you're trying to start a new city, whether it be in China or wherever, to have a sense of place. You can't just invent culture, or, well, you can. You can borrow culture and you can borrow other people's cultures. But does that make it successful? Should you be rethinking your own future culture? It's one of the questions that we really have to ask ourselves. The historic environment encourages culture activities, and it really does. Look at any of the cities in France. Look at the cities all around the UK. I think that the historic environment is key, because that's where your great-grandparents might have been, or that's where great, I don't know, battles were fought, or the history is what grounds us. And I think that history, everybody has history. Restoring the historic environment creates jobs and helps underpin local economies. Well, we've seen that in Temple Bar, in King's Cross, and we will see it in our new regenerated areas, like the London Olympics. And integration is key. Very often when you work with English heritage, you're given problems like, this is a small project that we did where one of the orphanages in Hackney had been knocked down except for just the portico. That was all that was left. And it was lying there, falling apart. And the council didn't know what to do with it because it was listed grade 2. So English Heritage came up to us and said, can you do anything with this site? Because there's a school next door. Maybe we can get some educational use into this. So we managed to get grants, and we managed to save the listed monument and create a contemporary addition to this. So the contemporary addition is really to respect the old and to add on the new without having that conflict, and to respect the scale of the building and to bring new use into the building. So it's a children's centre. So from being built as one of London's first orphanages, it continues to be used as a children's building. And I think that is, it's great to have saved a building. It would have been so easy to knock it down. I felt really proud to be a Londoner when we won the Olympics. Excuse me. I thought it was a fantastic thing for London, and I never realised it before how proud I was to be a Londoner. And I think that the identity that I'd always thought, you know, well, I'm very Irish and I'm this and that. And I thought, well, no, actually, I'm a Londoner, and it's not part of the melting pot that had always been described as diversity in London. It was really a kaleidoscope. It's a kaleidoscope of cultures, and I think that when we won the Olympics, after huge effort had been put into it, it was a proud moment for many people. And it's so easy to be negative about the cost of the Olympics and all of that. But I think that the Olympics, the Olympic Games, and more important, the Olympic legacy, is going to really add value to our world city. And it's going to add continual value to the Olympic Village and for all those people in our future generations. And I think it's been very well done. At the time, or a couple of years after this, after it was won, I was lucky enough to sit on the at the London Development Agency board, and we kind of oversaw an awful lot of the LDA, London Development Agency projects. And it was great to be able to say, no, we have to have better, we have to have sustainable projects, we have to promote green projects, even if it's going to cost 6 or 8% now more, it's worth doing it, because it's going to have added value in the future. The Legacy Master Plan, I think, is what it's all about. It's not going to do the Olympics and then after it's over, after the party's over, it's all going to be finished and gone. This is huge investment into our inner cities. It's creating a new urban design and a new urban way of life. And I think that if you look at London, what this map illustrates is that the further east you go on a stop on a tube, it's actually, because of the way that the health inequalities in London are, it's 1 year off your life the further east you go. The expectancy is 1 year off your life. And I think that in many ways that our cities have got to be more equal, and we've got to stop driving wedges between the rich and the poor. And we've got to stop saying, okay, well, let's have all the rich people in the middle and we'll have it all beautiful. And then on the outside or the outskirts, we will have all of the social housing. And I think that integration is key to the life of a city. So with the Olympics in its location in the Lee Valley, right in the heart of the northeast of London, there was the opportunity really to bring the whole of London together. It was stitching across the valley. It was really bringing old and new together. It was valuing what was already on the ground. So our Olympics, the most sustainable Olympics to date with the legacy. I think that having so many really good architects is a great showcase for our Olympics. I think that the way that the sensitivity, the investment, the infrastructure, that is really has been so well thought out. When you look at some places in China, I mean, I've just come back from China, and you see how quickly everything happens. You see how quickly cities and identical cities are being proposed as to be stamped all over North China. It's awesome. We went to Hong Kong and to Shenzhen, and I think the challenges will be, how do we build our cities of the future based on our knowledge of today? And I think that we need time to get the master plan right. We need time to invest in the culture, not just in the quick bucks or the short-term political making. So it's interesting when you've been to so many different places, how they compare. Our games, again, will be selling the very best of British. And, I mean, Westfield is one of the big shopping centres. I mean, I've never been in it. I have an aversion to shopping centres, which is probably unusual. But, well, maybe I'll wait until I've been into Westfield to make comment. But I think that sometimes big shopping centres and that kind of pushing of consumerism over culture is not necessarily the best way to go. And I think that was very apparent in China, that it was all about consumerism. It was all about consumerism. And it wasn't looking back, it was looking forward. It was about money and spending money. And you know, when people interview you for the press, they say, well, what do you think of our cities? You know, what do you think? Do you think they all look the same? Well, yes. Do you think that we value our history and culture? And they do, but they're not necessarily the ones that are in the driving seats that are to stop and to think. Now, if you look downstairs at the huge model of Doha, I think that is exemplary, because it goes back into the history and the roots without resorting to pastiche, without copying. In some of the developers' offices that we went to in China, we saw interpretation of what, you know, if they're going to increase tourism, well, where's popular? Let's look at Venice. Let's copy Venice and put Venice there in a kind of a very hot climate. And when it's out of its context, without the history and culture, it's that short-term blandness that I think that was so shocking. And I'm not criticising it, saying it's like that. I'm just saying that's partly our fault to blame if we are the people that are saying, okay, I can give you a Venice, I can give you a Costa Brava, I can give you the Côte d'Azur. But really, should we be looking at their own history and culture, which is fantastic and has gone on for generations and thousands of years? And how do you give a modern interpretation of that culture? And I think that will be the key to to success. It's the interpretation for the 21st and 22nd centuries. Not looking back and staying there, it's looking back and going forward, and it's the interpretation of our technology with the way we think and feel. So, moving on, we've got the River Lee, and we are celebrating the diversity, and it's the diversity of people. And the diversity of people is very important to me. It's something that I promote and have promoted for 10, 12 years. I think that diversity of people, diversity of voices, listening to people, is the only way we can design properly in the future. We can't assume that we know best on how to design for people. And about 6 years ago, I took an exhibition called Diverse City, promoting the people, the diversity of people in London. And it was meant to be kind of a shortest exhibition. But we got a call from the United States. Had seen our website and said, "Oh, I like the Diverse City. Can you bring it over to Los Angeles?" And we said, "Oh, okay, if you pay for the flight and accommodation, you know, we'll bring it over. Why not? We had no money." So we brought it over to Los Angeles and then Chicago and Boston. And then we got a call from Beijing. And Beijing and Zhengzhou, an hour south, wanted to bring the exhibition there. And everywhere we went with this modest exhibition, which is promoting diversity of people in architecture, the movers and shakers in architecture and the people that help to shape our cities and towns, it went to 34 cities around the world, and that was kind of word of mouth, website. So it was slow viral, if you know what I mean, because it was 6 years ago that it started, and it completed 2 years ago. But in that diversity, it led on then to the British Council ringing me and saying, "Oh, Angela, do you think you could lead a mission to Palestine?" I said, "Palestine?" I said, "Well, I wasn't expecting in my lifetime ever to go to Palestine, but, you know, tell me about it." And the British Council explained that what they want us to do is to share ideas on culture and identity and heritage, and it's exactly the subject of this talk. Because we all have our different cultures, no matter where we are in the world, but we don't understand each other. So I chose 6, and this was a women architect thing. So we were talking to women architects in Palestine who were in senior positions. They were town planners, designers. My partner was in the Hebron. So taking on this mission for the NENA countries, so it was Near East, North Africa. It was architects, it was engineers, it was filmmakers, it was entrepreneurs, but we were architects twinned with Palestine. And having gone there and met the most wonderful people in the world, and having gone to Jordan and had all of the architects from the NENA countries come to us and have the discussion and sit around and share knowledge and see actually how much we have in common. And what struck me was the richness of their culture and their history. Going into those museums and seeing all of these early tiles, whether it be from Roman times earlier and later, seeing that richness of culture from the Bedouins, seeing the culture in their buildings, in their monuments. And I'm not going to make any political statements, but I just think that we need to recognise the value and culture of where we all come from. And I think that that really opened my eyes to appreciate the culture of Arab culture, where we were meeting Arab and Christian women. We brought them all over to London. We brought them to our homes. I mean, they were sitting, eating dinner in my kitchen. And when you think, did you ever think that you would be engaging in this way? I said no. But I do see a future in us all engaging. And that's where I'm saying that the science is leading us, the beaming of new models of cities. I must be careful of my time, because as I'm Irish, I'm likely to keep going. How am I on time? I'm okay. Oh gosh, already. I better move on a little bit. So really what I'm saying is that it's the richness of the culture and diversity of people that is so important, and that is what makes good cities. So going through our wonderful sites in our games, we've got some of the best architects in the world. One of my favourites is Hopkins Velodrome. We've got the basketball arena, Wilkinson Air. Another favourite of mine is Zaha Hadid's Aquatic Centre. Mind you, I'm not so keen on it with the two temporary wings that looks like it's in a shoebox, but the legacy will reveal its beauty. So on a world stage, we will have our Olympics, we will have our regeneration, and hopefully it will be a model for us. It'll be a model of how our legacy of our new housing and even our new icons. Now, like it or hate it, I've heard the new icon described as the Eiffel Tower on steroids, and I don't disagree, but I suppose sometimes you get to like things after a while. So the future of London in the legacy is so important. If we look at developers who are doing good things, I would say that Argent, led by Roger Madeleine and one of his directors, are exemplar in inner city development, and particularly around King's Cross development. I went down there about 2 weeks ago for an update, and what is so valuable is that they've looked back, they've seen the layers of history, and they have worked with some of the buildings that would normally have been taken down. And if you look at how these fantastic projects have been integrated into a new, modern and contemporary inner city alongside the old buildings, then I think that it is definitely an exemplar for the way to do things. They've even got the cloud, so on your iPad you can get free cloud wherever you are. Niall McLaughlin's project is looking at the energy centre. And if you look at St. Martin's, well, all of the art colleges now that have grouped together, they are wonderful places and spaces to be in. I think my only problem with one of the students that came up to me at the opening of the art colleges, and she said, well, you know, we had to sign a contract that said we're not allowed to use charcoal because charcoal will fall on the floor and dirty the place. Well, I hope they break that contract, or at least get it changed, because as any artist will know, I mean, I'm sure, Willis, when you're painting, you don't kind of put anything on the floor to stop those paints, to stop the creativity. It's all part of the creativity. And with a college so large, you know, having to book yourself onto a machine and stuff, I don't know if that's going to really have the way that we were all brought up, where you have the studio culture and you share ideas. I just hope that bringing all of these people together is going to work on a people level as much as the architecture. Now, if we look at the great exemplar cities, we would look at Foster's Masdar in Abu Dhabi. Now, this, you might say, is for a very rich nation. It's for people who can afford to build so many buildings, which is probably about 17.5% of their population. And if that's a success, they can just quite easily do it and stamp it out. And why wouldn't they? I think that what I like about the Foster scheme is that it hasn't resorted to pastiche. It has looked at the Arab culture. It has taken, it's looked back and it said, well, the way that building in a hot country is done is with screening, with shading. It's not building glass skyscrapers and then air conditioning them. And I think what I like about Masdar is that it has the contemporary flavour of the arabesque architecture. And that's what I like. That's why I think it's such a success. A few years ago, I did a television programme and I was asked to choose 6 cities for their history and culture and then go and visit them, pick out the best of the town, pick out the best house, and then pick out an ordinary place. And one of the cities was Marrakesh. And what I loved about Marrakesh was the mixture of East and Western cultures. It was the mixture of people. It was the very strong identity that was there. It was that kaleidoscope of people. It was the narrow streets. It was the architecture of old. And if you look at that, for example, and the way that Masdar is developed, you can see the natural cooling. Whereas somebody else might say, okay, well, I'll copy the past and I'll stick on these kind of cooling towers on the top for the look of it, even though they might not work. And we would strongly advise against that way of doing things, obviously. But I think that Masdar, I'd love to go and see it and actually walk around it and see how it would work. But it's really, it's the essence of how do we build now for today. If you look at the bling of Las Vegas or suburban sprawl, the most unsustainable cities dying. If you look at cities that are built around the car and not around walking cities or about sustainable or fast-track transport or high-speed trains. Or we can learn from the abandonment of cities, like in Detroit. So what will the future hold? I think that with hugely expanding cities like in China and Hong Kong and Shenzhen and Beijing and Chongqing, I think Chongqing actually is a real city of the future, because Chongqing is looking at a sustainable future. It's using the best brains around the world to work with their Chinese people. And I think that the best brains on both sides is the only way that we can develop truly future sustainable cities. Because, as we know, people will use a city in any way they want. And I love this slide because it was the same when I was in Hong Kong. When on a Sunday, which is the free time day, people just go out into the streets and they will populate stairs going in a walkway over a roadway, or they will populate any little nook and cranny, because there are so many people that want to be out there to come together. And it's the coming together of people in a city that is important. We need to make the space for that. We need to embrace it. Oh, I think I'm going backwards. Okay. Louis Kahn built a lot of things in Bangladesh. And again, he was interpreting in a modern way how you build sustainably within their countries. So really, in summary, it's the quality of life, it's the historic environment that contributes greatly to quality. And it's that quality of life that we all are looking for. It is our sense of place. It's the successful regeneration, and it's sustainable communities. It's all about communities, places where people want to live, work, and play, and visit. So I've got a summary point here, which really is for the future, and how we're going to pull together this kind of left and right-hand way of thinking. So we need to really think how we're going to have the science side and the people side working together. So what we can do is we can pull together a global think tank that can set down a simple, integrated design approach that embraces the values, culture, identity, and history. And it is a subjective task. And it has been discussed many times, but I think we need to really come together globally on this issue. I think we could develop a global pilot project program with the main economies and powers embracing at least one project in their homeland and one in partnership with another country on a different continent. And it's to weave that web of cultural urbanism. And we can set in place technology-based, iterative and intelligent programs that will document, record and disseminate all that happens with evolution of these environments, and we can seek to draw clear principles and standards. And I think finally we need to recognise that this is a process of change, and one that will have to change, that we do not rely alone on technical data and outputs or inputs, numbers of economy or qualification to evince change. And I think that we need to establish human records which value impact on our environment and on our lives from childhood to maturity and old age. And we need to embrace nature. Sustainability will be an endless pursuit, repeatedly seeking new horizons and dawns as we seek to emulate the complexity and richness of response to nature. So we need to begin to develop and embed basic urban logarithms in our new cities, our quarters and our precincts, which reflects natural process of repair, growth and expansion. So with these new ways of thinking, I think that that's going to be the future for us. And it's really integration. It's all about integration, and I hope that you will all be taking part in it, wherever you are in the world. Thank you. Right.
Do you want to sit there? Yeah. Thank you very much, Angela. That was excellent. And lots of food for thought and discussion there. Before opening the floor up to questions and comments, I have a question for you about Dublin in particular, which I know you know from the inside. Clearly, Dublin over the years has been a very good example of urban regeneration, cultural regeneration, and the link between the two. It has also economically had its highs and lows. And I wonder whether you could comment on whether its economy, its economic development, which has been quite fabulous and then troubled more recently, what's its link to regeneration and the growth of culture, and thus, is it sustainable, do you think, for Ireland, for Dublin, and the sustainability of its urbanism from an economic point of view?
We all have waves, so 10-year growth plans. And I think that one of the big problems about the boom and bust that hit Ireland and Dublin, and well, all of Ireland, was we have a great expression, which is they lost the run of themselves. And this is when it seems to be so successful. And I think it seems that it's getting better and better. This is fantastic. Look at the value of land, when really we're only talking about bricks and mortar. And when people start disassociating real life from the bricks and mortar, you will get collapse. And that's what's happening. History repeats itself. So it will climb up again, but maybe this time we will have learned the lessons that overdevelopment, money-making, should not be the key for the future of any city.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Angela?
Well, good morning. Thank you for your presentation. As an urban anthropology, urban planner type person, I totally understand your perspective. I now work in a bank, and I want to know what conversations you're having with bankers around changing their metrics to fund these types of cultural innovative projects, because it's challenging, because obviously they're still looking at the bottom line and they're not open to taking risks. They're used to the traditional metrics.
Yeah, I mean, bankers, if you talk about bankers these days, it usually raises people's blood pressure. And I think that bankers have lost the run of themselves. I think that they need more women in those trading floors. We don't need young people with high levels of testosterone gambling futures of the world. And I think that the more diverse we can make the people that are running the banks, the better it's going to be for all of us. Okay, so that's my dig at the banks. But I think that banks need to invest in community. And I think that they need to invest in our cities, where investment will be the key to urban regeneration. And that's just like the things that I was talking about in King's Cross. It's that faith that if you invest, it will get better, because you've chosen the right partners and you've put in the time to do the master plan, that it's going to work. So I think bankers, they need to dust down. They need to dust down, and they need to arise from the ashes, and they need to have a social conscience.
Thank you. John?
Angela, I work with Msheireb Properties, the people that help with Qatar DR set up the idea of today. And I want to thank you on behalf of our CEO, Isa Al-Mohanadi, and Her Highness for Sheikh Mosa bin Nasser, for your talk that you probably had to put together pretty quickly covered a lot of the major issues of humanity was the first word that comes to mind, and then cultural identity, and understanding that we need to build quickly but build thoughtfully. And I think and also I'm not a member of the RIBA, but I know a lot of British design professionals, and I think that they made a good choice with you, because we know what institutions are like, and in choosing you, taking the risk or whatever, just choosing you and bringing a certain humility and humanity, to that institution is valuable for it, at this point in time. So I guess my question is we're forced in the Middle East. I think you haven't been there that often. I think it's good that you started in a good place when you started in Palestine. Yeah. So you started in like the best place. But to venture to the Gulf, and hopefully you'll come and visit us and see what we do. And we're under a lot of pressure because we have a lot of growth, and we're required to develop. It's not the speed of China, but it's almost the speed of China, because we have resources, and we have future plans, and we want to level the playing field and become part of the bigger world. So we're developing quickly, and what we've been working on in Msheireb, it's a 5-year venture, but the designs often happen in a year and a half. So and we have high aesthetic standards. So I guess my question is only your thoughts on how to match the right and the left and the speed and the humanity, if you had any thoughts on that.
In a way, our government maybe are accidentally doing it by giving the word localism, which will be upon us. Localism is asking people what they want, or some might say it's the government saying, we're not going to do it for you if you want to do it yourself. So if we're talking about engaging community and engaging people about their local area or about their district, whatever it is, I think the key is to bring the people along with you. And that's when I talk about the artistic side, the community side, the humane side, as opposed to, well, this is the process, this is how we're going to do it, this is the mathematics and the sums, and this is the architecture you need. And it's crossing the brain of those two sides of thought. And I think that's where we can say, bring the people in. And one of my big things is to go out. I'm outward looking from the RIBA. It's outward looking. And it's, if you can engage the community for a better understanding of architecture and environment, so that they demand it as a basic human need. And I think that is something that is very important. It is a basic human need to have the environment that's going to sustain us in the future. Why would we take a shortcut?
Good. We have time for one more question. Sorry. Did you have a question? Yes. Yes. Sorry.
I live in East London, and I've worked in journalism in the Middle East region for 25, 30 years. And I'm interested in the parallels, because I pass the Olympic villages, the buildings, which are truly spectacular. And when I go to places like Doha, I see a similar spectacular thing in architecture. However, I wonder about the responsibilities of creating such astonishing and beautiful things. There's concern in the East End as to what will happen. I know that all the ideas are in place, and I know that they're all very laudable. But isn't there a great responsibility comes with creating these wonderful structures, both in London and places in the Middle East, if we can't be absolutely sure that they will be used for the best of the people there? And I noticed that you had pictures of Roman Road Market, which is a very well-known East End market. But it seems to me that some of the markets and other social things have survived in spite of development, and I fear that may happen in the Middle East if we take out too much of our supersonic culture.
Yeah, I think it is all about diversity and that kaleidoscope, and appreciating that it's the people, no matter what their task, whatever their livelihood, whatever it is. I mean, I don't know, you might have read it in the newspapers, in the UK newspapers a few days ago, they're thinking about closing, developers thinking of closing down a very old bakery. And I think that that bakery is what gives that area its identity. It's what people would come and visit, and they'd actually be able to taste something as well. And I think that it is that link with the past, with the employment, with the people, will be of more benefit than knocking that down and then putting up an office block or something like that. That gives nothing back to the city. And I think that cities thrive and are alive because of markets. I mean, I love a market. I will go to a market, but I won't go into a shopping centre. I will go to the small little shops on a high street to try and give them local business rather than support the big corporate. And I think that we all have votes. You know, we have individual responsibility. And I think that if we as individuals can come collectively in our local communities and show support for what we as community value, we need more of us with political hats on. If we're the ones that put the politicians in power, if they're not doing their job, we've got to take them out of power again and put the right people in. And I think it's a matter of really standing up for what you believe in and saying, this is important. All of us here, these 1,000 people, want this market kept. This is our livelihood. It's our anchor in history. It's our heritage. And go viral with it. Go viral and campaign and get that support. I mean, campaigning is really important. I'll help you with my placard.
Good. Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you, Angela. I'm just going to close with one remark, that it seems to me that last question and answer was in a way about supply and demand. It did have the questions of commercial sustainability in there, in combination with how to achieve humanity and things that are best for us. And I just think it's incredibly important for supply to lead demand sometimes, even though often it involves bravery and leadership. And I think that's exactly your voice, Angela, that one has to be optimistic and front foot forward about how the world, how cities change and how they can be sustained. So I've got a lot from this talk and your comments. Thanks a lot. Those who didn't have time to ask questions, please ask them now in the coffee break, and we'll be reconvening very shortly for the panel. Thank you.